I called my daughter-in-law's sugar daddy. The words felt foreign and filthy on my tongue. But the rage burning in my chest gave me a courage I hadn't possessed in the 68 years I'd been alive. It wasn't a call I ever imagined making, not in my wildest, most dramatic fantasies. But then, I never imagined the emerald and diamond ring that had been my grandmother's, then my mother's, then mine. The ring I'd gifted to my new daughter-in-law as a sacred welcome to our family would end up on a shady online auction site, listed as vintage Art Deco statement piece, with a no returns policy. The notification had popped up on my phone from a collectibles tracking app I'd completely forgotten about. I'd uploaded my most precious items years ago for insurance purposes. There it was. My heirloom. My history. Photographed on a velvet tray that was decidedly not my son's. The description was cold, impersonal, utterly devoid of the sentiment that made the ring priceless. And the seller's username, Lux Life Lily, was a sickeningly obvious pseudonym for Elara, my daughter-in-law. I felt the betrayal like a physical blow, a sucker punch to the soul that left me breathless and shaking. It wasn't about the money, though the listing price of $15,000 was an insult in itself. It was about the legacy, the trust, the utter contempt she had shown for our family. She had taken the most tangible piece of my heart and put a price tag on it. Subscribe for more stories of justice served and karma delivered. The initial shock curdled into a cold, simmering fury. I confronted her, my voice trembling not with weakness, but with the effort of controlling my temper. I showed her the listing on my iPad, my finger tapping the screen so hard I feared it would crack. Her face, usually a perfect mask of serene beauty, flickered for just a second, a flash of panic in her expertly lined eyes, before settling into a facade of confused indignation. "Eleanor, that's absurd," she said, her voice a little too high, a little too sharp. "Why would I do that? I love that ring. I would never sell it. It must be a fake or someone stole the photos." "The inscription," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The one inside the band. Eternal love him. You can see it in the close-up. The seller provided that photo. Who else would have that?" She blinked, her composure cracking another inch. I must have posted it on my social media. Someone must have screenshotted it." It was a flimsy, pathetic lie, and we both knew it. I had never seen her wear it in any of her meticulously curated Instagram posts. The ring was too old-fashioned for her taste, she'd once hinted. She preferred the cold, minimalist, and outrageously expensive brands her friend, a wealthy older gentleman named Arthur Pendleton, seemed to keep her supplied with. "I want it back. Elara, now!" I demanded. "I can't get it back right now." She hedged, avoiding my gaze. I sent it to my jeweler in the city for a cleaning and appraisal. For the insurance, you know. It will be a few weeks." Another lie. I could smell it. I left her house that day, the air thick with unspoken truths, and my shattered trust. My son, Liam, her hopelessly enamored husband, just looked torn and confused, caught between his mother's palpable hurt and his wife's practiced denials. "Mom, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding," he'd said, his voice pleading. "Elara wouldn't do that." His blindness was a separate, deeper heartache. That night, fueled by a grief that felt like a death, I did something I'd never done before. I became a detective. Elara's life was an open book if you knew where to look, which was primarily on her semi-private social media accounts. She was careless, flaunting her luxury handbags, her weekend trips to Napa, her spa days, always with a coy caption thanking a special someone or celebrating a generous mentor. The special someone was always the same man in the comments, Arthur Pendleton. A few clicks later, and I had his full name, his company, Pendleton Holdings, and his office number. The idea didn't form fully until a few days later, when I checked the auction site again. The ring had been sold. The listing now bore a triumphant "Sold" banner across it. My grandmother's ring, the one she'd worn through a world war and the Great Depression, was gone. The finality of it unleashed something in me, a quiet, calculated madness. If Elara wanted to treat my family's love like a transaction, then I would speak her language. I didn't just call Arthur Pendleton. I planned my attack. I waited until 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, A time when assistants were likely gone and people were winding down. Perhaps more receptive to a surprising call. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs as I dialed the number for his direct line, which I'd found on an old charity ball committee list. Arthur Pendleton. A smooth, confident voice answered. I took a slow, steadying breath, the one I used to take before a big presentation back in my corporate days. Mr. Pendleton, my name is Eleanor Vance. I am Liam Vance's mother, Elara's mother-in-law. There was a slight, cautious pause. Yes, how can I help you, Mrs. Vance? His tone was polite but guarded. I was an unknown variable in his carefully managed world. I'm calling about a matter of some delicacy. I began, my voice even and calm, belying the storm inside. I believe you are a patron of the arts, so to speak, a benefactor to my daughter-in-law. The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the alarm bells ringing. I pressed on before he could form a denial or hang up. I'm not calling to cause trouble, Mr. Pendleton. My concern is purely financial, and I thought, as a businessman, you would appreciate full transparency. It has come to my attention that a family heirloom of significant, sentimental and monetary value, an Art Deco, emerald and diamond ring I gifted to Elara, was recently sold on a private auction site for $15,000. I let that hang in the air. I heard a sharp intake of breath. I'm not sure what this has to do with me, Mrs. Vance, he said, but his voice had lost some of its smoothness. Well, that's the interesting part, I continued, as if we were discussing a mildly intriguing business proposition. You see, the proceeds from the sale of a gift are technically considered income for the recipient. Given the nature of your financial arrangements with Elara, and the substantial sums I understand you provide her, I became concerned about the tax implications for you both. Unexplained deposits, gifts from third parties. It can look very much like structuring to the IRS. I'm sure your accountants are excellent, but I felt it was my duty to make you aware, as a courtesy. It was a masterstroke, if I do say so myself. I wasn't the angry mother-in-law. I was a helpful, concerned citizen, warning him of a financial pitfall. I was speaking his language, the language of money, risk, and liability. What are you suggesting? He asked, his voice now low and tense. I'm not suggesting anything, I said sweetly. I'm merely informing you that the ring you've likely admired on her finger is gone, converted into cash. I have the receipt for the sale right here. The paper trail, as they say, exists. I'd be happy to forward you a copy for your records. I imagine your legal team would want to review it. The line was so quiet I thought we'd been disconnected. Then a terse, "Send it to this email." He rattled off an address, his voice clipped and cold. Of course. Have a good weekend, Mr. Pendleton. I hung up, my entire body trembling with adrenaline and a savage sense of triumph. Then, with steady hands, I forwarded the email confirmation of the sale, the one I'd screenshotted as proof, to the address he'd provided. The subject line was simple: documentation for your records, as discussed. I sat back in my armchair, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that the luxurious house of cards Elara had built was about to get a very strong, very cold gust of wind. The game was on, and for the first time since I'd seen that auction listing, I was the one holding all the cards. The silence after my call to Arthur Pendleton was the most profound of my life. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a pressurized one, filled with the echoes of my own audacity and the impending shockwave I knew was coming. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Not from Arthur, not from Elara, and certainly not from my son Liam, who was still blissfully unaware that his mother had just launched a tactical nuke into the center of his marriage. I spent those days in a strange state of suspension, my nerves stretched taut as piano wires. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt into my throat. I was simultaneously terrified of the fallout and grimly satisfied that I had, at least, acted. The first crack in the dam appeared not as a flood, but as a trickle. It was a Wednesday morning when Liam showed up at my doorstep, unannounced. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed with a confusion that looked painfully familiar. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "Can I come in?" I ushered him inside, my mind racing. This was it. Elara had told him some twisted version of the story, painting me as the vindictive, meddling monster-in-law. I prepared myself for the confrontation, my heart aching for the son I might be about to lose. He didn't speak until he was seated at my kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. "Elara's upset," he began, staring into the dark liquid. "Really upset. She's been crying for 2 days straight. She won't really talk to me." I remained silent, letting him find the words. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading for an answer he didn't yet know the question to. She said you did something to sabotage her. Something about a business opportunity with Arthur Pendleton. She said you called him and lied about her. And now he's cut her off completely. Frozen her accounts. Taken back the car. Everything." His voice broke. "Mom, why would she say that? What's going on?" So Arthur had acted with swift, brutal efficiency. He hadn't confronted her. He had simply dismantled the lifestyle he funded. He was a businessman, after all. And Elara had become a liability. I felt a cold sliver of respect for the man. He understood consequences. I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. Not as a battle, but as a surgery. I had to be precise and careful, and remove the tumor of lies without killing the patient. My relationship with my son. "Liam," I said gently. "I did call Arthur Pendleton, but I didn't lie." I picked up my tablet, my fingers steady now, the initial fear replaced by a calm resolve. I pulled up the auction listing, the one with the sold banner. "This is why." I handed him the tablet. I watched his face as he scanned the page. I saw the confusion first, then the dawning recognition, and finally, a slow, horrifying understanding that washed over him like a wave of nausea. His shoulders slumped, the fight going out of him. "That's Grandma's ring," he whispered, his voice hollow. "It was," I corrected softly. "I gave it to Elara as a symbol of our family. She sold it for $15,000. When I confronted her, she lied to my face, said she'd sent it to be cleaned. So I called the man who was essentially her employer. I informed him that she was generating undeclared income from the sale of gifted assets. I framed it as a concern for his financial liability. I sent him the receipt. It seems he took that information and decided she was more trouble than she was worth. The whole story tumbled out. I showed him the screenshots of her social media posts, the comments from Arthur, the pattern of a life funded not by their dual incomes, but by a sugar daddy. I spoke not with anger, but with a profound sadness, laying out the evidence like a prosecutor presenting an open and shut case. Liam listened, his head in his hands. The picture was too clear, the evidence too damning to ignore. The luxurious apartment he couldn't quite afford, the designer clothes that appeared without discussion, the sudden gifts. It all clicked into a devastating mosaic of deception. His marriage, the life he thought he was building, was a beautifully wrapped empty box. "I feel like such a fool," he mumbled into his palms. "I knew she liked nice things. I thought Arthur was just a family friend, a mentor. She said he was like a father to her." He let out a bitter, choked laugh. "A father who buys you a Lexus for your birthday." We sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, mother and son, surrounded by the wreckage of his trust. The anger I had expected from him never came. Instead, there was a grief so deep it was silent. He was mourning the death of the woman he thought he'd married. Subscribe for more stories of justice served and karma delivered. The final act did not involve a dramatic, screaming confrontation. Liam, in his quiet, methodical way, was far more formidable than that. He went home that night and didn't say a word. He simply packed a bag, told a stunned and red-eyed Elara that he knew everything about the ring, about Arthur, about the lies, and that he would be staying with me while he contacted a lawyer. The fallout was swift and merciless. Without Arthur's funding and with Liam's income severed, The facade of Elara's luxurious life crumbled within weeks. The landlord of their high-end apartment began eviction proceedings for unpaid rent. The car was repossessed. The stream of packages from high-fashion websites ceased. Liam filed for divorce on the grounds of fraud. Our smoking gun, the receipt for the heirloom ring I had sent to Arthur, became a key piece of evidence, demonstrating her willingness to deceitfully liquidate marital assets. As the ring, a gift was considered in our state. For personal gain, Arthur Pendleton, when subpoenaed, provided a devastatingly clinical deposition about the nature of his financial arrangements with her, effectively corroborating our entire case. He had no loyalty to her. She was a bad investment he had already written off. Elara, stripped of her funding and her husband, put up a pathetic fight. She tried to paint me as a jealous, manipulative witch, and Liam as a mama's boy who couldn't satisfy his wife. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge saw through her tears and awarded Liam a favorable dissolution of their brief marriage. She was left with nothing but the clothes in her closet, most of which, Liam pointedly noted, had been paid for by Arthur Pendleton. A month after the divorce was finalized, a small insured package arrived at my house. It was addressed to me. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside, nestled in a bed of foam, was my mother's emerald and diamond ring. There was no note, only a plain business card from Arthur Pendleton's office. He had, it seemed, used his considerable resources to track down the buyer and repurchase the ring. It was not an apology. It was a settlement, a closing of the books, a final transaction. I held the ring in my palm, its weight both familiar and newly significant. It had been the catalyst for all of this. It had cost my son his marriage, but it had also saved him from a lifetime of lies and financial exploitation. It had cost me my peace for a time, but it had given me back my son, our relationship now forged in the fire of a shared trial. That evening, Liam came over for dinner. We didn't speak of Elara or Arthur. We talked about his new job, his new smaller apartment, his plans for the future. As he was leaving, I stopped him at the door. "I have something for you," I said. I opened my hand, revealing the ring. "I want you to hold on to this." He looked at it, a complex history reflected in his eyes. "Mom, I can't. Not for you," I said with a small knowing smile. "For the future. For the woman who deserves to wear it. The right woman. You'll know." He hesitated, then took it, closing his fingers around the metal and stones. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a lesson, a standard, a promise of a more honest future. He hugged me tightly, a silent understanding passing between us. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to his car pull away. The house was quiet again, but the silence was no longer pressurized. It was peaceful. The war was over. Karma, with a little nudge from a vengeful mother-in-law, had been delivered. And justice, I thought, as I looked around my quiet, truthful home, had never felt so sweet.